stitching friends, I'm Amy. I am the Globetrotting Stitcher, and I'm here today with Gary, who is also a Globetrotting Stitcher, and we are delighted to see you. We hope that you're doing well. We've had a little bit of an extra gap in since our last video, just because I traveled and life is busy. So thanks for sticking around, waiting for us to come back with another update. We have been enjoying our stitching. We hope you have as well. If this is your first time visiting us, welcome. This is a YouTube video about cross stitch. So if you're into cross stitch or you think you might be into cross stitch, you're in the right place. If you're a returning friend and subscriber, welcome back. Thank you so much for sharing some of your time with us every few weeks. So not a whole lot in the way of life updates, just a couple of quick things. It is hot here, and I guess I shouldn't complain because in the Pacific Northwest we have not been fighting with the heat wave that everybody else in the US is dealing with, but it's definitely showing up here for a couple of days. So our temperatures are 10 to 15 degrees above normal right now, and thankfully those are forecast to come down in another couple of days, but we're weathering the heat right now. The other thing I wanted to tell you about, we had a funny little incident with Summer. So our new dog Summer that we introduced a couple of videos ago, she's been settling in well. She's starting to calm down. She's young and she's full of energy. And so we knew that there was going to be a process for her to kind of figure out her place, feel at home, and kind of start acting like she's got some manners. But she had a little incident the other day. What was it, yesterday or 2 days ago?
Yesterday.
Yesterday. So we were just hanging out, and I remember I heard a little bit of rustling in the other room, and I was kind of like, "Where's Summer? What's she up to?" But I was feeling lazy, so I didn't get up and go check. And about an hour or two later, Gary comes in, and he's carrying like 2 empty plastic bags, and he's like, "Look what I found." So next to our toaster, we typically keep bread products, and Summer had hopped up onto the counter, not like jumped up on the counter, but put her paws on the counter, and she's never done that. The dogs know they're not allowed to get up on the counter, but she put her paws on the counter and she pulled down a couple packages of bread, and that stinker ate like a hamburger bun and a half a loaf of whole wheat bread all by herself. So she's been paying the price for that with stomach pain, and I have been calling her Greedo because she's the next morning you would not have thought that she had eaten half a loaf of bread and should still be feeling very full from that bread. She was like, "Where's my breakfast? And also, can I eat my brother's breakfast?" So anyway, she's a stinker, but she is settling in and doing well, other than occasional monkey pants behavior. Excuse me. I also have mentioned in our last video that I was getting ready to go back to Kenya for work. So it was a fairly quick trip, but I have some interesting stuff to share with you. So if you want to hear about that, we'll share that at the end of the video, but just wanted to mention up front that yes, made a quick trip to Kenya and now I'm home. So all that being said, let's go ahead and dive into the stitching, and we'll show you what we have been up to. So the first thing, I have a finish, and I have been working on a little gift for my niece who is turning 13 later this year. This was a brand new start the last time you saw it. So this is Swifty. The chart is by Simple Wave Studio, which is on Etsy, and I stitched this on a piece of 32 count opal raspberry smash linen by Vintage Needle Arts, also an Etsy shop. So as I said, this was a new start the last time you saw it. I had 20 stitches in it, and it is now finished. Still in the hoop, but here's how it turned out. So this was a really quick stitch. I mean, it was less than 500 stitches. So I put it on this pretty, sparkly pink linen, because this is colors of her bedroom and she loves these colors. I used a DMC Etoile, but with the fabric being as sparkly as it is, you don't see much of the sparkle in the floss, and that's fine. The only change I made to the chart was I added this sparkly little heart charm here. just because I thought that would be a fun thing to throw into the design and add a little bit of an extra interest to it. So sometime in the next couple of weeks, I need to get into the sewing room and turn this into a pillow so it'll be ready to gift when her birthday rolls around. But this was a really fun, really quick stitch. I took it with me on the trip to Kenya, and so I worked on this on the plane, and I had everything finished by the time I got there except for the French knots in the eyes and putting on the charm. And so I finished those last two things after I got to Kenya. But yeah, that is Swifty. So, and in case you're wondering, as my niece is entering her teen years, she is entering her Taylor Swift fandom era, as all of us do eventually. And so this, I think she'll be really excited about this. Okay, let's see here. Find a spot for that. So that's it for finishes. So let's get into the whips. So I've got a couple whips to show you, and then we will show you what Gary's been working on. But first of all, after our last video, I worked on my seasonal design. I am currently working on Honey Gardens by Filigram, and I am stitching this on a piece of 32 count Chasescape Lugana by Silkweaver, mostly called for DMC with a couple of subs in the colors. So the last time you saw this, I had made some really good progress. So I had finished stitching the left side of the top border all the way across to the middle. I had stitched, excuse me, the queen bee that is in the middle of the design. Had also stitched the beehive that's on the left-hand side and was working my way I was stitching through the flowers that go across the middle of the design. So here's where this is right now. Reasonably good progress considering that I worked on this the week that I left for Kenya, so I only got 4 days of stitching on it. But as you can see, I've worked my way across the top of the border now, and I only have a little bit of work left to do in this jar of honey, and then the top border will be all done. Stitched in more of these flowers across the center of the design, and then started working my way through. I've made really good progress in the beehive on the right hand side. So this one I think should get, next time it comes up, I should be able to finish it. I'll just, there's a little bit of work that happens on the bottom here, but a lot of the heavy lifting is done on this one. It's been really fun, and so I'm looking forward to having that done and getting it framed up. Hopefully before the end of summer, so I can actually display it with our other summer pieces and with its companion piece. So that is Honey Gardens. All right. The next piece that I worked on is my De Farben Venedig, which is the Colors of Venice. And this is a design by Historische Stickmuster. I am stitching it on a piece of 36 count Cream and Sugar linen by Fiber on a Whim. And I'm using all the called for Soie d'Alger silks. So the last time you saw this, I had finished stitching. So this design is 4 rows of rectangles. And so I had stitched all of the top row, and then I had stitched, started stitching into the second row, so I'd finished the kind of the gold and black rectangle that's on the far right side, and then had started stitching in the center rectangle on the second row, which is like blue and brown and cream. So this is where this is right now. I also took this design to Kenya with me. And so I had a couple of days where I was able to get some good time on it, and then I had a couple of days where I just didn't have time to pick it up at all, which, that's how travel is for work. So I completely finished the blue rectangle here in the center, and then made a really good start. I'm about halfway through the rectangle over here, this kind of like silvery gray with kind of gold accents. And then just finishing off strands of floss, got tiny starts on the 3 rectangles in the row below. But this one, did I get to the 50% mark? I think I didn't get quite to the 50% mark, but I finally got close to the 50% mark on this, which I'm happy about. So I think this is so pretty. It's a kind of a unique design, and I really love it. I know where I want to put it once it's finished, and so I'm excited to, I feel like kind of getting to this point, this almost 50% point, it feels like it's got more weight and substance to the design now. So very much enjoying this and looking forward to working on it again. All right, we'll take a break from my stitching and let Gary talk about his stitching.
All right, well, I guess I'm working on two things. At least that's what we left off at. I just expected a longer intro.
Oh,
My bad. I'm never ready. Anyway, so let's talk about Wonder Woman first. Wonder Woman is by Cross Stitch Bay. It's an Etsy shop, and it's stitched on 16 count Pewter Ada with the called for DMC, with the exception of there's a teal blue in her hair. We changed it to DMC. I think it's 517. So I guess I couldn't say with called for, but closely called for. I think the last time you saw it, I had filled in the color on that particular page, or was hoping to start the next page. That's really about all that was going on there. So this is how she looks now. I kind of think it's neat because you have the contrast. We have I think from your perspective, it'd be the right side has color, and then the left side is just like black and white. So I can't wait to finish out the rest of the outline and take a picture of that. It should look pretty neat, at least to people like me. Anyway, so that's where we are in Wonder Woman. I'm not going to make any predictions about where I'll be, but for reasons that will be clearer in a bit, I'll probably make much more progress on this than I had anticipated between now and the next time we sit down and do this. Anyway, so that's where Wonder Woman is. And then the other one that I was working on for what seems like, I don't know, a long time, is Louis Armstrong. That is by Stitching Jules Designs, and it's stitched on 16 count white Ada. It's just black as the DMC 310. Anyway, so that's what that is. So I don't know, the last time you saw this, I'd shown you where we had to do a lot of frogging because I had miscounted, and I'd put it down and just started working on Wonder Woman a lot. Anyway, so I picked it back up, and Amy had figured out what was wrong. We put it in that little electronic thing. What's that?
Oh,
Minder keeper. What you did keeper. That thing. We put it in that, and I actually thought it was cooler to use it in that because I was able to follow where things should go much easier than having a piece of paper and eyeballing it. I could literally just mark it out, and it was less likely that I would make a frogging error. However, when I got to the tips of the fingers, I had to slide it down in the frame because there wasn't enough room to finish the tips of the fingers. So when I got it opened, I just opened it up to see what it looked like, and I realized that here's how much room. Well, there's a picture of it. That took up. This is like the whole thing. This is a picture of the whole thing, I guess, opened up. That particular section is 2.5 pages. 1 and 7 or 1 and 6 are stacked on each other, and then 2 is next to 1. But either way, it didn't take me too long to figure out that I had 4 more pages to do on the top, and there was no way there was enough fabric. So we measured, and we're like 5 inches short. So I could frog it all. I'm not doing that. What we're thinking of doing though is what is that? Just framing it so that we can always remember to measure twice and cut once. Because I haven't worked on it consistently over the past 10 months or so, but I have done a lot of work on it in that time frame, and there's nothing we can do. I suppose we could get some fabric some other Aida and stitch it to the other side. But I don't think either of us want to do that. Anyway, maybe one of you guys has a suggestion. We likely won't follow it, but it'd be good to hear it'd be good to hear what you think can be done. Anyway, so that brings me to this week's action figure, who I had no intention of getting, but then I realized he had his own action figure. I don't know anything about this guy other than he's called Ambush Man, and I got him because I was feeling surly after I realized that all the work I had done on Louis Armstrong, I won't say was for naught because I learned a ton, but in terms of project completion was for naught. So anyway, I hope things are well in your neck of the woods and that this sort of thing never happens to you. There should be a warning on every kit. Measure first. Measure. Anyway, that's I got nothing else.
So, you guys, I have been stitching for 35 years. I have never in 35 years had a project that the fabric was not large enough. I've just never run into this. And when Gary said to me last night, he was like, I don't think there's enough. I was like, no, I'm sure it's fine. We measure, blah, blah, blah. And I know when we ordered this fabric, we ordered a large enough piece of fabric for it. So I can't remember where we got the fabric, but I think there was just a mix-up somewhere where we were shorted on fabric because I've just never had this happen before. But yeah, I think Gary took it so well. He was just like, and I was like, inside I was devastated because I was just like, oh my goodness, you put so much work into that project. And I told him, I was like, the people are going to be devastated. They love that project. So anyway.
Well, I'm going to do it again just after I heal. There's been some internal scarring, so that's good. I'll try again. But we might get fabric that's entirely too big.
A yard.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. I called my dad, who is also a cross stitcher, and I was last night, and I was like, Dad, you got to pray for Gary. He's like, why? What happened? So anyway, a massive stitching disaster. But yeah, if you guys have suggestions or advice other than, I like Gary's idea of kind of finding some sort of redemption for this piece and framing the partial. But if you have other ideas, we definitely are open to those. Okay, so we're gonna move on to a project for which we know there is enough fabric. And that is my weekend stitch. So I am working on Butterfly Port Mauve by Heaven and Earth Designs, and I am stitching this on a piece of 28 count white easy grid Lugana 2/1 using a combination of half stitch and continental stitch. So I've put in about 1,500 stitches since the last time you saw this. And when you saw it the last time, I was probably about halfway done. There's a peachy, creamy flower. And I was about halfway done with filling that flower in. And of course, working on background, because there's always background, especially in the column where I am working. It's just a lot of background. So this is where I am right now. So you can see I am almost done with all of the fill-in on this peach flower down here. There's just a little kind of bit of petal left to stitch, but that is nearly finished. And of course, I've carried that background down further, starting to see if, more ninja stitches kind of showing up as I, continue to work threads in. But yeah, that's where it is right now. I did pass a little bit of a milestone while I've been working on this in recent weeks, and that is this is now just over 10% finished. And it's almost to 30,000 stitches. We're not quite there yet, but getting close. So yeah, it's really, I can't say it's really coming along. I mean, this is definitely one of those pieces that is multi-year project, or multi-decade potentially project. Of course, at some point, I would imagine that this will move into my regular rotation, my regular full coverage rotation. But that's not likely to be for quite some time. So this will, for the foreseeable future, will be a slow but steady progress project. But it is nice to kind of pull it out of the frame and see just how far I've come since I started it. Like I said, it's slow but steady progress. I think it's really beautiful. So that is my butterfly port mauve. All right, and I have one last whip to share with you, and that is my wild card project, which I have been working on for the last week. So I am stitching Cabin Fever by Dimensions. It's a Dimensions Gold Collection kit, and I am using the kit fabric and floss. The fabric is an 18 count Aida. So the last time you saw this, I was working, I had made just a little bit of progress on the bottom story of the cabin. Not a ton of progress, and of course was just really focusing on filling in the background underneath the deer. There's kind of this meadow section that over kind of is next to a little pond, and so I was stitching in some of the meadow section, as well as some of the trees in the background, that it's more of the center of the design. So here's where I am right now. And I'm quite excited with what I've been able to accomplish. So as you can see, I've filled in more of the meadow section here. Most of the flowers in that meadow are done, and I'm continuing to fill in the grasses. I also have done more of the fill-in here down through the center, and, carried the sky all the way across now, and then done more of the fill-in here. I also did more of this bottom story of the house, and that's kind of showing up a bit more. And then beneath that, you can kind of see a bit of the outline of the motorboat that is parked in front of the cabin. The other thing I did was I came over, I put this on a wider set of Q-snaps, and have started working on this kind of side of the A-frame of the cabin. One of the things that I think has really made an impact on how this is looking, and hopefully you'll see it in the close-up pictures, I did a little bit of backstitch. I was finally able to get to a point where I could do a few more sections of backstitch. So I did put in one strand of black, and what that allowed me to do was finish up the outline of the shoreline of the pond here. And it's amazing just what that one strand of backstitch has done, because now you've got this kind of additional dimension that has shown up, but you also can now really start to see that what you're looking at here is not just like blurry blobbiness, but it's actually sort of the soft, ripply mirror image of the backdrop up here that's reflected in the pond. I also was able to do some of the backstitch on the deer. I've got one more color of backstitch to finish off the doe here, but got the black backstitch done there. And then finally got to put in the first little bit of backstitch on the cabin, and so you can kind of see a little bit more of a dimension to that one tiny little section that I've done that stitching in. So this one is also now over 50%, which I'm super, super happy about, because it's such a big design. I've been working on it just a year now, and so I'm happy to finally be at 50%. I think I had ambitiously anticipated that this project would only take me a year. I have since revised that projection, and I expect that it'll probably take me another year to finish, but it's definitely feeling like you're actually really seeing what the design is now, and so that's really exciting, and I think this is really beautiful. So yeah, this is Cabin Fever by Dimensions. So that is everything we have been working on. We did have one question that came in on our last video that I wanted to respond to. So Mihaela929 said, a question for the two of you, so I think we can both answer this. is, are you stitching from paper or are you using an app to follow the pattern? So I will answer first and say that I almost exclusively stitch.
I will answer second.
Sir, it's not your turn. Would you like to go ahead?
No.
No?
You keep going.
Oh, okay. All right then. What was I saying?
Follow the flow.
I'm so lost. I almost exclusively stitch with an app now. So I am using both Pattern Keeper and Markup RXP. So Pattern Keeper is what I am using. I use Pattern Keeper for all of my full coverage. So my Heaven and Earth designs, both of my projects from Hade, I am stitching with Pattern Keeper. When it comes to full coverage projects, I like the functionality and interface of Pattern Keeper a little bit better. Markup RXP, I really also really like, but I tend to use Markup RXP for virtually every other project that I am stitching because it is a lot easier to, in my opinion, to get to scan paper charts and put them into Markup RXP. I've just had a lot better luck with their interface of being able to get usable uploads into that tool. And so I like both tools. I think they're both great. I recommend both of them. I just use them for slightly different purposes based on the kind of project I'm doing. But yeah, I'm at the point now where I will still purchase paper charts, but if I can get a PDF, I will get a PDF. And then if I can't, I will scan my paper chart in and upload it to Markup RXP. And the developer on that particular app has done an outstanding job of continuing to work the interface and the tools so that as long as you've got a straight scan, you can usually upload it in such a way that the lines all match up and it's a usable chart for marking off. So yes, for me, almost exclusively, I hardly ever use paper chart anymore, and that's only if I absolutely have no other choice. Gary?
Again, right there, no warm up or nothing.
Oh, sorry.
Wow. Okay. I actually have done like 7 projects, completed 7 projects, and I've only used paper. That's what I started with. I can use almost any electronic device. I'm pretty literate that way, but I do like time away from them, so I didn't want to use one. I just didn't want to use one. And then I ran into a lot of problems with frogging in Louis Armstrong because there's lots of counting. It's like, put 1 here, now go up 6, put 3 here. Anyway, there's just a lot of counting. With the, what is it? What am I using? Pocket Magic, what?
Pattern Keeper.
Pattern Keeper? Okay. Pattern Keeper, it's easier to see where you are and where you have to go next because you can zoom in and it's just easier. So for me, at this point, for projects like Louis Armstrong, if I ever take another one of those on, I would definitely, the more complicated the project, I would say I would recommend using an app. But if you don't care, then just paper's fine. I don't think I need an app for Wonder Woman. It's pretty clear. It's pretty cut and dry what you do there. But anyway, that's my take on app versus paper.
All right then. So I'm going to give you a quick overview of what we're going to be working on for the next couple of weeks, and then those of you who are not interested in the globetrotting part and don't really care to hear about my trip to Kenya, we'll let you go on to your next cross stitch video, and then those who want to hear about that can hear about that. So plans. I am going to spend 1 more day working on Cabin Fever before I put that one away for this round. And then after that, I'm going to spend a week working on my full coverage, which is Rose Trellis In. And then after that, I'm going to spend another week working on the Colors of Venice or De Farben Venedig, and see how much farther I can take that. Gary is going to be working, of course, on Wonder Woman and contemplating what will happen to Louis Armstrong. So we shall see. So that's it for our stitching plans. As I said, if stitching is all you're interested in, thank you so much for spending time with us today. And we will release you to your next video. Those who want to hear a little bit about my trip to Kenya, that's going to be the focus of the rest of this video. So as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, this was a pretty quick trip. I was just going in for an annual project meeting. And so I flew in to spend a few days on the coast of Kenya in the city of Mombasa, or just outside the city of Mombasa. And I am used to, and most people, when they think about Africa, they think, oh, it's all hot. But actually, there are some big sections within different countries in Africa where it's not hot, or where it's not as hot as you might think. And while Nairobi can be very warm, it's definitely, because it's a pretty high elevation, it tends to be cool. So there have actually been times when I've been in Nairobi, which is where I usually am most of my trips to Kenya, where I've actually been chilly and like, oh man, why didn't I bring a sweater? Mombasa is not that. Mombasa is everything that people associate with as far as temperature wise when they think of Africa. It is hot, it is humid. And I was there in winter and I was hot and I was humid. And even like all of the folks from different parts of Africa who were there for the project meeting were like, it's really hot. So it was hot, but beautiful, really, really beautiful. So this was a trip that had a little bit of adventure to it. So just getting there was quite the adventure. So every single flight that I had was delayed for one reason or another. So my flight out of Seattle was delayed by a couple of hours, and I was like, that's fine. I'm not worried about it, because I had like a 4.5-hour layover in Amsterdam. And so I was just like, no worries, it's fine. So we get to Amsterdam, and I headed to my gate. Well, actually I was watching the monitors, because I had still had a little bit of a layover before I had to actually board my flight. And so I'm watching the monitors, and normally in Amsterdam, it will tell you, like, when they're getting ready to board, they'll have a little thing that says, please go to the gate. And I'd been watching, and it wasn't coming up. And I was like, well, all the other flights that are leaving at the same time are saying, please go to the gate. Why isn't mine? And I was like, maybe somebody's not paying attention. So I go on, and Amsterdam is a big airport, y'all. If you haven't been there, it is a big airport. So I hoof it down to not the terminal. Well, it is the terminal, but like the wing of the airport where my gate was. And as I get closer and closer to that section of the airport, like just crowds of people, just really densely crowded. And initially I was like, it's early summer, this is vacationing traffic. People are, it's just a busy day at the airport. And as it kept getting thicker and thicker and thicker with people, I was like, this feels like something's not right. And so I finally get there, and I can see my gate, because it was the very first gate in that wing of the airport, but I cannot get to the gate. And I'm like, what is going on? And there was like a group of KLM flight attendants standing there. And I talked to them. I was like, can I just go to my gate? And they're like, no, that wing of the airport is closed. Somebody pulled a fire alarm, and so people had to evacuate that wing of the building, and some people got out onto the tarmac. And so now we've got people who have to, it's a security situation, and they got to figure it out. So like any flight that's going out of that wing of the airport is, we have no idea when it's going to reopen and let those flights go. And I was like, oh no, because I had a connecting flight. So I had to catch that flight to Nairobi, and then I had a 1-hour window to connect in Nairobi so I could catch my flight to Mombasa. And I was like, this is bad. This is really, really bad. So it was at least a good hour and a half, 2 hours before they finally were able to reopen that. And I was just like, okay, I have given up. I'm like calling our our company's travel desk, and I'm like, here's what's going on. Is there any way you can book me out? And my flight out of Nairobi the connecting flight was leaving at midnight. So I was like, it's the last flight of the night. I'm going to have to find a hotel in Nairobi. Like, this is just going to be a nightmare. So we left super late. They made up a little bit of time in the air, but not very much. So we land, and I'm fully expecting when we land in Nairobi that I'm just going to be like stuck in the airport trying to sleep for a few hours, and I'm not looking forward to that. I get off my flight, and there's a woman standing at the gate, and she's like holding a sign that has my name on it, and I was like, "Hi," and she's like, "I'm here to escort you to, your next flight." Well, as it happens, she's like, "We have 10 minutes. They are holding the plane for you, but we have to be there in the next 10 minutes." And she's like, I'm in the international terminal. The domestic terminal is like another building, and you have to go all through all this. I had to get through immigration, another round of security, and like cross to this other building. Dead run. Like the guy at immigration, he couldn't find, because I have a visa in my passport. He couldn't even find my visa. He's just like, "I'm just stamping you through." So we do that. We like run, and heavy bags, because I don't check a bag. So this lady and I are like, we split my bags up, and we are like running across this parking lot, across this field to get to the domestic terminal. I had a water bottle from the plane that was in my bag that was full of water. They just whipped me on through security, and we run out, and I made my flight like by the skin of my teeth. I was literally sitting on my flight, and I was like, this was a miracle. So it was just like a wild, and it should have been a signal it was going to be a wild trip. So, oh my goodness, you guys. Wow. So thankfully, I did make my flight. I get into Mombasa. It's like, I finally got to my hotel, and I had been awake for well over 24 hours at that point, because I have a hard time sleeping on planes. So I was just like, I don't even know my own name. By the time I got to the hotel, it was like 2:00 in the morning. Anyway, got in, it's all fine. We get our meetings started. They're really great. And the place that we were staying was really fantastic. It was super fun because, we were right on the Indian Ocean. So the place where we had breakfast every morning just looked right out over the ocean. It was so beautiful, so, so beautiful. But it was also one of the things that's nice about kind of getting out of the city center when you're going to something, is that a lot of times the places that you stay, you'll see a little bit of wildlife. So it was really fun because there was a little bit of wildlife, not like wildlife, but a little bit of wildlife that was just kind of roaming through the hotel. So some beautiful lizards. I saw this really pretty one that was like dual colored. But the thing that I loved was the monkeys. And they did warn me when I checked in. They're like, just make sure you close your balcony door because there's monkeys. And I was like, all right, that's fine. And I actually had a monkey that like jumped up next to me as I was, like climbing up the stairs to my room, because it's an open air kind of situation to climb the stairs. Anyway. But it was the season where the monkeys are having the babies. And so it was like a lot of like, there's this really sweet thing I saw where like the mama monkeys are carrying the baby monkeys on their bellies, and they're kind of running along. And so that was really sweet. And anyway, it was just fun to kind of see monkeys around the hotel campus, so to speak, throughout the day, as we were kind of going from place to place between meetings. So that was really fun. It was kind of a nice experience. I don't get that very often because when I'm in Nairobi, you just don't have that experience. We also had a really cool experience where one night we went into Mombasa Old Town and took a dhow ride and had a dinner on a dhow. And a dhow is an old, like handcrafted wooden trading vessel. And so it was just really neat because we went and we climbed down to the river, get on the boat. They had live music, and we took a river cruise through Mombasa Old Town and had our dinner, and it was really lovely. It was a really nice experience. And then I got to spend some time doing field visits at the one of the government ag research stations that is near to Mombasa, or in Mombasa. And so the project that I was going to visit is a project that what they are doing is they're working on getting a new variety of maize released to the public. So in Africa, there's a number of pests and diseases that are problematic for maize. You also have problems a lot of times with drought and with crops not being able to get enough water because of drought problems and not getting enough rainfall. And a lot of, like your small scale producers, they have small plots of land, so they don't have irrigation like you would on a really large farm. So one of the things that we've been working on for a very long time is trying to breed improved crops that are more drought tolerant, but that are also resistant to the pests and the diseases that are problematic. And so this new variety, and it's really interesting, I got some video and some photos, so hopefully you can see the difference, because what they're doing in the right now, they're doing the national performance trials so that the government can test these new varieties and make sure, hey, these are actually good quality, they're safe, they're all these things, so that they can be released to the public. And so there's a whole process that you have to go through. But what's been done is, they're doing a comparison where they're growing side by side an older variety of maize that is just drought tolerant, but it's still very vulnerable to some of the local pests and diseases. And so two of the problems that this area really has, actually not just this area, but other parts of Africa as well, maize is really susceptible to a pest called fall armyworm and another one called stem borer. And they can just come through and decimate a crop. And they'll just eat the leaves and eat the cobs, and it's a real problem. So anyway, this new variety is not only a drought tolerant variety, but when tested under like heavy pest pressure where you've got a lot of these pests, it is visually striking how much of a difference it is. It's also a more productive variety. So once it gets approval, it's going to increase maize yields for farmers by like 30 to 50%. It's going to be really transformative once it gets into the hands of enough farmers. So we're going through the process of trying to, get it released. And we were looking at the field trials that they're doing at the government research station in preparation for that. So it was really cool. Hopefully you've been seeing some videos and some photos of that. One of the other things that was really great that we weren't planning on, because this is a maize project, but there's a cassava project that they're also doing trials for at this same research station. And it's a project that it's a variety of cassava that we've also worked on and partnered with researchers on, where cassava is a really important food security crop in Africa because it's a root. And what it can do is if you've got a farmer that's planted cassava and they've had a really great harvest on their other crops and they don't really need cassava, they can leave it in the ground through the season and it can continue to bulk up into the next growing season. And then if they have a bad growing season, the next growing season, they can dig up those roots and they've gotten nice and big and plump, and it can keep your family fed if you've had a bad growing season. So it's a really important crop for that. It's not a great crop nutritionally, but it's calories and it's dense. And so it's useful in that sense. The problem in Africa is that there are a couple of viral diseases that are carried by a pest called whitefly that have just been completely wiping out farmers' crops for more than a decade. And once they get into a field, it's like almost a complete loss. And so one of the things that we've been working with researchers on is to develop this new variety of cassava that has a higher level of vitamin A, so it's more nutritional, but that it's also resistant to these two viral diseases, cassava mosaic disease and cassava brown streak disease. Now, what was really cool about getting to see this, because this, although it's not tied to the project I was there to visit, this cassava, and I remember working on this when it was still like being researched in the lab, and now it's in trials to be released in the country. Cassava mosaic disease, a farmer can tell if their plant has it because it wilts the leaves and it makes markings on the leaves, and you can tell you've got a problem. What's really terrible about cassava brown streak is it makes your roots completely inedible, and you don't even know you have it most of the time until you dig those roots up and prepare to eat them, and then you cut into them. And I've got a photo of somebody who's holding the traditional cassava that is infected with brown streak, and it's next to this new variety of cassava that has disease resistance. And these two varieties, again, grown side by side under the same conditions, experiencing the same pests and diseases. And you can see the difference between the one that is completely not edible and totally infested with disease and the one that's in the same field, but because it's a stronger, better variety, it doesn't have that disease. So it was really fun because I got to actually like gnaw on the cassava and chew on it a little bit and taste it. It's fine. It's dense and it's very fibrous and it's not very tasty, but it's not meant to be consumed raw. So there's that. Anyway, for me, it was really exciting because these are crops that I've been partnering with researchers on for over a decade. And remember when these were just being developed, genetic testing in the lab, breeders working, trying to get, to cross for the right traits. And now we're finally at the stage where they're almost ready to get into the hands of farmers, and it'll be transformative for those farmers. So that for me was it was really, really exciting to get to see this stuff at that stage growing, and that it's there and it's working and it's good and it's real. So anyway, that was exciting. The last thing I wanted to tell you about, and some of you may or may not have heard about this. A lot of times, this doesn't make international news in the US, but it did, I think, this time. There were some pretty significant protests that have been happening and that were going on while I was in Kenya. And fortunately, I missed the worst of it. Things got pretty violent. Some people died, which I'm sorry. It was very, very sad. And I actually saw the protest one of the days that I was in Mombasa. Where I was, it was very peaceful and we were very safe where we were. But in certain parts of the country, things were not entirely safe. And I mention it because I think it's important for folks to understand, a lot of times people will see a protest and they don't understand, well, why is that happening? And this is a really difficult situation because there's legitimate, valid things on both sides. So the folks that are protesting, in Kenya and in other parts of Africa, you've got, there's challenges with youth unemployment. And you've got really well-educated people with bachelor's degrees, master's degrees, and they're not able to find work. And it is like a really high unemployment rate. And then on top of that, the government is trying to introduce these new taxes on, a few things because they need to increase revenues. And people are saying, people there are struggling with inflation, they're struggling with unemployment, they're struggling to make ends meet. And they're saying, we cannot pay any more taxes. We cannot do this. And they're frustrated. And they have totally valid reasons to be frustrated. And so they're protesting. And on the flip side of that, you've got a government that, in recent years, a number of African governments have taken on a lot of debt to fund new infrastructure projects to help build their economies. And unfortunately, COVID and the crisis in Ukraine, which has had an outsized impact in Africa, have impacted these countries, their abilities to grow their economies. And so now these debts are coming due. The governments cannot service those debts. And so they're saying the only way we can increase revenues to cover these debts is through taxes. But the people can't afford it. And so it's this really complex, really difficult situation. And that is a really boiled down, distilled, simplified, simplification of what's happening. But it's a really sad situation. It's a situation where unfortunately you also have some bad actors that are taking advantage of a situation and to take an opportunity to do some wrong things. But all that to say, I was there when it was going on. I know they're still, as of right now, still kind of working through some of that. But thankfully, I was in a place where I was really safe. So anyway, for those who might have heard about it and were interested, I thought you might want to know a little bit, just a simplified explanation for kind of what's going on and why they're struggling with that. So I think I have rambled on long enough. I hope I haven't bored anyone. Yeah, wanted to tell you a little bit about my trip. So I hope you enjoyed the videos. Hope you enjoyed kind of the extras on top of the stitching. So we will look forward to seeing you soon. If you enjoy our videos, please do give us a thumbs up. Please feel free to leave a comment. We do read all the comments and really enjoy them and try to respond as quickly as possible. You can send me emails between videos to globetrottingstitcher@gmail.com or follow me on Instagram, globetrotting_stitcher. So with that, we will see you soon, and happy stitching.